displayed woeful incompetence when investigating complaints and concerns about the programme.
A promise with destiny kept, and she is mourned most deeply in her passing. Damaging nature by not understanding how much we depend on her.
For decades it had lived as rumor, whispers behind palace walls, half-glances exchanged in state rooms, unspoken suspicions cloaked in formality. But all of that changed when one man collapsed, not from illness, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of a truth long buried. Prince William, the heir to the British throne, was handed a letter, one never meant to be read in his lifetime. Its author, Diana, Princess of Wales. Its contents, a secret that threatened to unmake the monarchy. A question that, if true, would change everything. At the center of it all, a single line of doubt. Was Charles truly his father? The unraveling began quietly, in a dimly lit archive room inside Kensington Palace. It was supposed to be a routine transfer, just another file being moved from one secured vault to another. But among the tightly bound papers and catalogued memorabilia lay an envelope, cream-colored, unassuming. It bore no royal crest, only 7 words in Diana's unmistakable hand. For William, when the time is right. The archivist paused, knowing this was no ordinary note. Inside was a letter, private, undated, but clearly written in the twilight of Diana's trust in the institution she once served with grace and sorrow. The contents of the letter have not been released publicly, but those who've read it say it was more than just emotional. It was a warning, a message from mother to son, from past to future. Diana's words carried weight beyond sentiment. Truth has a way of rising, she reportedly wrote, even through marble walls. One day, William, the questions you never asked will find you. The letter did not name names, it did not accuse, but it pointed toward silence, toward secrecy, toward fear. And for William, it was a blow not just to the crown, but to identity. In the days that followed, the prince reportedly withdrew from all public engagements. Aides said nothing. The palace refused to comment, but the man at the center of the crown's future was no longer standing quite so firmly. And then came the second blow, this time not from a handwritten letter but from science. The test that shouldn't exist. Following the letter, a second document surfaced, one buried even deeper. It wasn't written on royal stationery. It bore no emotional introduction. It was a lab result, a DNA profile. The origins of the test remain murky, but royal insiders say it was conducted quietly years ago, during a time when scandals swirled around the palace like smoke. The results were sealed, protected by layers of security and discretion. Until now, what it contained was simple, clinical, devastating, a mismatch. According to sources close to the investigation, the profile did not align Prince William's DNA with that of King Charles III. The implications were immediate and catastrophic. The question, once whispered in tabloid margins, now stood unflinchingly at the gates of Buckingham Palace. Who was William's father? Speculation surged. Some suggested the test had been commissioned in the late 1990s, when media scrutiny of the royal family had reached a boiling point. Others pointed to the years following Diana's infamous Panorama interview, when tensions within the firm grew colder and more calculated. But the questions now echo louder than ever. Who ordered the test? Why was it hidden? And who brought it back to light? A senior royal staffer, speaking under strict anonymity, put it plainly, this is no longer a private matter, it's a constitutional one. And they weren't wrong. If the DNA test holds true, the future of the British monarchy, its succession, its lineage, its public trust, could be fractured beyond recognition. For William, the blow came not from hearsay, but from proof. It was more than family. It was the foundation, and it had just cracked. Then, inevitably, came the name that had shadowed Diana's legacy for decades, Major James Hewitt. The man who was always denied he was dashing, decorated, a cavalry officer with charisma to spare, and for a time, Diana's confidant. For over 2 decades, Major Hewitt denied the rumors, repeating with conviction that he did not meet Diana until 1986, 4 years after William was born. The palace stood by that timeline. So did Diana's closest friends, but recent revelations have begun to unsettle even the most carefully constructed history. Retired royal staffers have begun speaking, some anonymously, others more candidly, suggesting that the relationship between Diana and Hewitt may have started far earlier than publicly stated. Diary entries, driver logs, unreleased photographs. One retired palace bodyguard claimed he was instructed to escort Hewitt discreetly to private residences as early as 1981. It was before Harry was even born, he said with chilling clarity. The physical resemblance between Hewitt and William, once dismissed as coincidence, has reignited public interest. The ginger hair, the angular jawline, the posture. For years, these comparisons were waved away as media fantasy. But with the timeline now under question and the emergence of scientific evidence, what once seemed like gossip has taken on the tone of prophecy. Hewitt himself, once willing to speak, has gone silent. In the early 2000s, he dismissed the rumors with ease. But when approached by reporters in recent months, he offered no comment. His legal team responded with a statement that said everything by saying nothing. No statement will be given. In a world where silence is currency, that response carried weight. For William, the reality was crushing. Sources close to the palace describe him as stunned, adrift, and devastated. After receiving the second document, he reportedly locked himself in a private room and did not emerge for hours. One aide described him as frozen. He wasn't crying, he wasn't speaking, he was simply gone, somewhere far away. Because what do you do when your entire identity begins to unspool at the edges? A future in doubt. What started as rumor now feels dangerously close to revelation. If William is not Charles's son, what happens next? Does it change the line of succession? Does it change public trust? Or does it change nothing because the truth, however disruptive, comes too late? Inside the palace, the walls remain quiet, but the air has shifted. The monarchy, long bolstered by tradition, is now facing something far older and far more potent than ceremony: truth. Diana once said, "Being a princess isn't all it's cracked up to be." She was right, especially when the crown rests on answers no one dares to speak aloud. The palace has denied nothing, confirmed nothing, but Prince William, the man destined to be king, is now standing on ground that no longer feels royal, and somewhere quietly the legacy of a mother who once warned him in ink has come back to life. Her letter had ended with a final line, written in a firmer hand: "When the time comes, don't be afraid of the truth, even if it frightens them." That time has come. The collapse that shook the crown. Secrets, when fully formed, do not whisper. They strike. And on a quiet afternoon inside a private wing of his estate, Prince William fell. It wasn't an illness, it wasn't exhaustion, it was a revelation. One that came after reading two things never meant to find him: his mother's handwritten letter and a DNA report that no palace aide could have prepared him for. The future king had been brought to his knees not by scandal, but by something far more dangerous: truth. According to those closest to the scene, William was found collapsed in his quarters, unconscious and pale, the pages of his mother's words still clutched in his hand. His security team responded in seconds. Emergency personnel were dispatched under confidentiality orders. Doctors were brought in quietly, without fanfare, as the palace quickly sealed the perimeter. The silence that followed was not routine, it was strategy. No statement was issued from Kensington Palace, no clarification from the Royal Communications Office. There was only stillness, and inside that stillness, those who knew William best could feel it. The world had shifted. A senior staffer later remarked, "It wasn't just a shock, it was grief, the kind that rewrites everything you thought you knew." That grief extended far beyond William's private chambers. Inside the same estate, Catherine, Princess of Wales, reportedly broke down in tears. She was seen guiding their children gently into another part of the house, shielding them from the chaos that had descended upon their family. The letter had been emotional enough, a cryptic message from Diana, intended for William only when the time was right. But paired with the DNA report, its meaning sharpened. It was no longer a warning, it was confirmation. And as that realization took root, the man who had been groomed for the throne since birth was now questioning not his future, but his past. Within hours, the energy around the palace changed. Meetings were cancelled. Advisors were unreachable. William, the anchor of the modern monarchy, had disappeared from sight, and yet the storm was only beginning because King Charles had not yet been told. A silent crown, an unspoken crisis. The news reached Clarence House just before midnight. A royal aide, breathless, delivered it directly to the king. Diana's letter had surfaced, a DNA report followed, and William had collapsed. The expectation was understandable. After all, this was the monarch, a man with decades of carefully measured public reactions, now confronted with something that could undo not just his family. What followed, however, was not fury, not grief, not even denial. It was silence. King Charles said nothing. He did not address the press. He did not call his son. He retreated into his private study and closed the door. Those closest to him waited. They expected emotion. They received calculations. According to insiders, the king remained in that room for hours, engaging only with his most trusted legal counsel and senior advisors. No public remarks were prepared, no press strategy outlined. It was as if the world outside his walls no longer existed. A longtime confidant later admitted, "He's always feared this day, not because he believed it, but because he knew Diana held secrets, and secrets never stay buried." That fear was no longer abstract. It had arrived, handwritten and signed. What unsettled the palace most wasn't the letter or even the DNA, it was the king's reaction. Cold, quiet, focused, as if somewhere inside he had already prepared for this moment. Perhaps he had. A former royal aide stated flatly, "The king is many things. Naive is not one of them." And yet, for all his measured calm, Charles knew the cost. His crown was not just ceremonial, it was symbolic, and symbols, once cracked, rarely mend. He understood that his silence might read as guilt, that his absence in his son's hour of need would not go unnoticed, but the decision had been made. Charles would not speak, not to the press, and not to William. Instead, he summoned one person, his sister, Princess Anne, the only one he trusts. She arrived quietly days after William's collapse. No cameras, no statement, no royal escort, just Princess Anne, arriving at Sandringham under the pretext of a family retreat, when in truth, it was a crisis summit. For decades, Anne had been the monarchy's silent blade, loyal, measured, respected even by its critics, and now she was being asked to hold the firm together at its most vulnerable. The meeting was private. Only senior family members were present, but according to those near the room, the mood was unlike anything seen before. The tension was a living thing. One aide said, "You could feel it through the walls." It was grief and fury and fear, wrapped in silence. Anne reportedly listened more than she spoke. She looked at Charles. She looked at the documents. She asked a few pointed questions, but mostly she sat in thought. When the meeting ended, she left without a word to the staff. Witnesses noted she hadn't smiled since. Anne was not in an enviable position. She loved her brother. She respected the crown, but she also loved her nephew and could see the cost of silence wearing him down. She was the bridge, and bridges, even royal ones, strain under too much weight. That night she sat alone in her chambers, going over the facts once again. Diana's letter, the DNA report, the timeline, the appearances, and above all, the question that could not be erased. If the foundation of the royal family was false, what remained? Operation Menai Bridge in the shadows behind palace doors, another process had begun. Known quietly as Operation Menai Bridge, it was the official protocol for the king's passing, a detailed plan to ensure a smooth transition of power. It had been rehearsed, refined, sealed, but now it is under review. Because if William was no longer the undisputed heir, then every clause had to be reconsidered. According to royal sources, legal teams were asked to review succession documents line by line. What had once been a symbolic procedure had now become a constitutional necessity. One courtier admitted, "This isn't just about tradition anymore. It's about law, and the law is suddenly uncertain." At the core of the dilemma was a single truth. The monarchy's power is built on legitimacy, not just public trust but bloodline. And if that bloodline is questioned, the crown is no longer an inheritance, it's a debate. Parliament remained quiet, but inside its chambers, discussions had begun. Some called for clarity, others whispered about bypassing William altogether. One name kept surfacing, Harry. What had once been unthinkable was now being studied in silence. Could the line of succession be redrawn? Could Parliament intervene? Could the nation withstand a crown built on unresolved questions? The monarchy had survived wars, divorces, abdications, but this was different. This wasn't about conduct, it was about origin, and origin cannot be rewritten. At Kensington, William remained unseen. He had not spoken publicly since the collapse, Sources said he had resumed private duties but remained emotionally withdrawn. "He's functioning," said one aide, "but he's not whole. And how could he be? His title was intact, but his identity was not." The man who had trained his entire life for the throne now stood in a shadow of doubt, unsure if that throne was ever truly his to inherit. And so, the silence deepens. The crown remains. The press speculates. Parliament waits. And in the quiet, one question echoes louder than all the rest. What happens if the next king is not the rightful one? The palace does not answer, but behind the scenes, they prepare. Certainly, below is your rewritten script, now fully aligned with the immersive, emotionally restrained, and suspense-driven tone of the saved sample, Royal Rescue Diary. It includes compelling subheadings and unfolds in a continuous narrative style true to the original structure. The heir and the outcast. In the shadows of a crumbling royal order, one name keeps surfacing: Prince Harry. Once the outlier, the runaway royal who traded palace gates for California sunshine, he now stands as an unexpected pillar in a monarchy rocked by secrets. For years, he was seen as the rebel, the spare, the younger son who walked away. But now, as the legacy of his brother faces collapse, some believe he might be the last legitimate hope for a crown, desperate for stability. If Prince William were to step down, or worse, be removed from the line of succession, there is only one place the institution can turn: Prince Harry. And the irony is staggering. Despite public fallout, interviews, memoirs, and a transatlantic retreat, Harry has never been surrounded by whispers of scandal regarding his lineage. No DNA files buried in vaults, no shadowed letters passed through history. He is by blood the unquestioned son of King Charles, and yet the very system that once treated him as an afterthought might now depend on him for its future. But the question no one can answer remains: would he accept it? Harry has built a different life, one far from royal protocols and palace intrigue. He has publicly called out the machine that raised him, and with every interview and statement, he put more distance between himself and the monarchy. And yet, if the throne were to fall into his lap, would he turn away, or return as the reluctant heir the nation never expected? Far from the spotlight, in a quiet Windsor cottage, another royal contemplates her place in the unfolding crisis: Queen Camilla. Once the outsider, then the consort, and now a woman staring down the collapse of everything she helped build. Her rise from scandal to public acceptance has been anything but easy. Years of quiet work, subtle appearances, and carefully constructed dignity, all now hanging in the balance. If William's bloodline is called into question, the illusion of a unified royal family crumbles. The blended image Charles, Camilla, and their heir vanishes, and with it Camilla's hard-won place in history. For her, this scandal is not just institutional, it is personal, and the silence she now maintains may cost her everything. Then there's Catherine, the Princess of Wales, and the woman many once called the monarchy's most powerful silent strength. Throughout the scandal, she has been present but distant, not absent but deliberate, a calm surface hiding deeper storms. Sources close to the family describe a woman in quiet pain, shielding her children from headlines, holding firm in public but unraveling in private. If William's claim to the throne is challenged, her own future as queen consort becomes uncertain. She has carried the weight of royalty with grace for over a decade, but nothing could prepare her for this. And now, as public trust wavers, the once untouchable future queen faces the same scrutiny her mother-in-law once endured. The scandal that may end it all. This isn't just another royal misstep. It isn't a tabloid affair or a misjudged comment caught on camera. This is different. This scandal strikes at the very root of monarchy itself, lineage. And for the British public, the realization is staggering. In a nation known for tradition, even the whisper of a broken bloodline carries the power to shatter generations of belief. For centuries, the crown has survived war, divorce, abdication, even assassination. But a paternity crisis, a false heir, that is something else entirely. And the people are no longer silent. In an age of screens and scrolling, this secret has not remained in the halls of Buckingham Palace. It has exploded into the public square. Social media has erupted. Hashtags like DNA Gate trend globally. Petition sites call for investigations. Polls show a rising tide of distrust. What was once whispered in elite corridors now floods group chats. news broadcasts and dinner tables. And the palace? It says nothing. The silence, once a symbol of dignity, now feels like retreat, and that silence is costing them. The public wants answers, not whispers, not well-dressed deflections, just the truth. Because at the heart of this scandal is more than succession, it is betrayal. For the British people, who held the Windsors as symbols of heritage, dignity, and resilience, the idea that they may have been lied to is more than scandalous. It is destabilizing. Inside the palace, the temperature has changed. What began as quiet concern has become panic. Insiders describe a monarch slipping into isolation, refusing briefings, skipping appearances, and rejecting calls from Parliament. King Charles, once praised for his endurance through public shame and decades of scrutiny, has vanished. A figure once steadfast is now still. His isolation is no longer strategic, it is alarming. Even senior royals, once assured of their roles, are in limbo. No clear direction has been given, no family statements, no public unity, just a vacuum. And into that vacuum pours fear. Legal scholars weigh in, warning that if Prince William is found illegitimate or steps down voluntarily, a constitutional crisis could unfold. For over 1,000 years, the British crown has depended on legitimacy. Without it, there is no throne. Parliament has reportedly held quiet meetings. Some push for emergency succession reform, others for public acknowledgement of the investigation. The fear is that if the matter is not addressed, the public may do it for them. And once the people question the crown, it's not just one heir at risk, it's the whole institution. And yet, there is no roadmap for what comes next. If William does step aside, there is no precedent, no script. And that is perhaps the greatest threat of all. The monarchy has always relied on its ability to endure, not adapt. But this time, endurance may not be enough. This is not a matter of image. It is one of blood, law, and legacy. And as Diana once said, the truth has a way of rising. Her words, once dismissed as poetic, now ring like prophecy. The tides are shifting, and no crown, no matter how ancient, is immune. So what comes next? Will Prince Harry become the reluctant savior of a family that once exiled him? Will Camilla's past finally eclipse her present? Will William walk away from the throne he was born to inherit? Let us know what you believe in the comments below. Like and subscribe for more exclusive stories as this scandal unfolds. And remember, the monarchy may stand tall, but the truth, once risen, never bows.